We've looked at initiation, we've looked at planning, and then today we're going to take it further and look at what? Project execution. Now, whenever you're going to be executing a project, there are key concerns, and that's the word, key concerns that you must take forward. What are the key concerns that you must pay attention to? The very first key concern when you are executing a project is actually what you call risk. Why? Whenever you are executing anything, what will happen? There will be risk. Problems, you should anticipate problems. Does it make sense? For instance, when we're planning the class, myself and peers, we anticipated some challenges. One of them happened today? Make sense? Risk. The next thing you're going to...
Yes.
All right, cool. Now, the next thing you're going to be aware of is that you must still ensure that you deliver value. There is no compromise with the issue of value. No compromise. Why? If you don't deliver value, then you are out of business. The next thing you're going to have to do while you are executing a project is to be aware that you must give your best in terms of communication. So we had to speak to each other using the group chat. Oh, let's move to this, let's move to this, let's move to this. And right now I'm going to ask you that I'm going to take an extra 15 to 30 minutes of your time today. I'll take only 15 so that I don't take too much, and I'll make sure I cover it by tomorrow so that we can all have complete what the things we missed earlier. So I'm communicating now. So go to the chat box and then drop me a yes or no on what you think about what I just shared now, giving me an extra 15 minutes of your time today. If it's not convenient, we can move it till tomorrow so that we don't miss out of the things we have to do today. All right, that's communication again. And communication, you know, it has to be two ways. If I say it and you don't accept it, then it's no communication. The next thing you're going to know is that there are going to be what? Project artifacts. We're in class at the moment. An interesting thing that you may not be aware of is happening. Some people are with their diaries around them, and they are taking notes of some things that they might need to check back or keep themselves reminded about. What they don't know they are producing is that they are producing what you call an artifact. An artifact. Now, I'm going to also enjoin you guys and say, please, tomorrow, be in class ready. We will take a picture before we start the class. What am I trying to produce? An artifact. Things you can use to what? Recreate history. One day I might want to look back and say, my first class with this person, when I met this person, the first time I met this person was in this class. And I'm using it to what? Reconstruct history. I might be in your city in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and I'll give you a call. I'm in your city. Where are you? Where are you? Let's go have some fun. What am I trying to do? I have a document that I can use to what? Reconstruct history, an artifact. And the next thing you're going to also know when you are executing a project is the fact that there may be changes. Statutorily, we all accepted that we're going to be here by 12 UK time to 2:30 to 2.5 UK time, 2:30 UK time. Interestingly, guys, we've lost some time today because of what? Technical issues. And then we have to go to make 15 minutes changes, which we are yet to agree on. Only a few folks are in it. Okay, so that's changes. The last thing that will happen, two of the other things you need to be aware of are issues. And then the last one is, after this period, what I'm going to have to do is to document the knowledge, the things we learned in this class that we should not allow repeat itself in subsequent classes. That is called knowledge transfer. Likewise, you also might take with you things you have learned in the course of this project that you would not allow. You want to pass it on to someone, and all of that, knowledge transfer. Good. Let's keep going. The journey started. First man on the board, on the table, risk. I'm going to spend the time thinking of how to identify, assess, and then manage risk. The risk journey, I like the risk journey. Whenever I speak about a knowledge area, whenever I open a text about a knowledge area, the first thing you're going to see on my slide is that I put all the processes involved in that knowledge area. So what you have there are all the processes involved in the risk knowledge area. Risk is a knowledge area of its own. You plan risk, you plan the risk management, you identify all the risk, perform qualitative, quantitative. I'm going to walk you through the whole journey today. Now, what is a risk, first and foremost, before we go into planning a risk and all of that? All uncertain events, all. Uncertain means you are not so sure of it. It could go either ways at any time. That if it occurs, and if they occur, they could have either a positive or a negative effect on one or more project objectives. All uncertain events or condition that if it occurs may have a positive or a negative effect on one or more project objectives. I like the way that is very detailed. It means that all uncertain, the fact that it says all uncertain events means that there could be positive events and there could be what? Negative events. And they could affect the whole project, or they could just affect one of the objectives. Whether it affects the whole project or it only affects one of the objectives, its impact cannot be ignored. When a risk is positive, it is called an opportunity. However, when a risk is negative, it is called a threat. You see, a positive risk means that we can solve it. An opportunity is something you can solve. Like you see a good wave, yeah, in the water, and you're like, wow, this is a very solvable wave. I'm going on it, man. Now, a positive wave is something you want to solve. You want to enjoy it because the outcome will be what? Amazing, sweet, something to work with. On the other hand, a negative risk is something you would rather want to avoid. Okay. Interesting. Now, the next thing you need to take to knowledge is the fact that we've identified risk. Now, before we continue, let me emphasize. A risk is an uncertain event that may occur. Guys, it's not that has occurred, but that may occur. So you are anticipating this thing called risk. Good. Because you are anticipating the thing called risk, you need to understand that there are what triggers that makes people know when a risk is about to happen or not to happen. If you guys were following the trend in the last 5-7 years, Bill Gates kept warning the world, a pandemic is coming, a pandemic is coming. People kept asking, this guy, you are a techie guy, how come you are here talking about a pandemic coming? You know, some people felt he was into a lot of voodoo. That's how he knew. But you know, he's a very well-read guy. He's very well-read and well-read across disciplines. So what he was able to see were triggers, an event, a situation that tells you a risk is about to occur. I'm sure you know this kind of event. Let me give you a very good one. Drinking and driving. It's a trigger that one could be involved in an accident. You see a fight, you don't know what the fight is all about. You just saw a fight on the road. You went and put your hand. Oh, let me go and join them. I want to prove a point to that person. There is no point. You're about to lose your life. That's a trigger. You don't even know what the fight is about. You know, there are triggers that could lead you into what? Risk. So you need to what? Watch out. So it's not only about knowing a risk, it's also about understanding possible triggers that can make that risk happen. Good. Now, the planning, the identification, the analysis. So you've identified a risk. Like, let's say drinking an accident is a risk. What is the trigger? Lack of sleep, lack of good sleep before you pick up a car. Driving when you're tired. Alcohol before driving. That's a trigger. Now you analyze the risk. What is the impact of this risk? The impact could be a complete loss of life. You know, now you analyze the risk and you now tell yourself, how do I respond to this risk? So you come up with what you call a risk response. Now, all of these put together is what we know as what? A project risk management. So when you see a job and they say risk managers, we're looking for risk managers. What you need to look at, that job is telling you, we need someone who can plan for risk, identify risk, analyze risk, and then plan risk responses for every risk he identifies. Get it? A risk management plan. You remember the big book called the Project Management Plan? Remember the very big book that we've been carrying along? Some call it the Risk Bible. Some might call it the Risk Quran, depending on what religion you believe in. The big book with the smaller books. Make sense? Good. Now, you carry that big book, and one of the small things in that big book is what? Risk. You're carrying the risk in your what? Portfolio, risk plan. What is the risk plan about. It carries a list, how you will what? Identify. How would you identify? There are different ways to identify risk. And I'll show you that today. So you would ask yourself, how do I want to identify? How do I want to analyze? How do I want to what? Find out this risk self. It is something the organization I'm working for will be ready to what? Undertake. Or should I just let it go? So let's keep looking at the journey. How do you identify risk? How do you identify risk? You identify risk through the use of what? Expert judgment. Expert judgment. Now, let me give you a very good example. If you walk into your auto dealer's house, your auto dealer's garage right now, walk into your auto dealer's garage right now. When you get in there, sometimes you don't even have an idea that your tires are bad. The next thing you're going to hear from your auto dealer is, he tells you, please, sir, you might need to change these tires. You say you might need to change these tires. My question to you will be, would you say, no, I'm not changing the tires? Is that what you would say? Hello? Anybody in class?
No, absolutely not. I would change the tires because it's a risk.
Interesting.
Risk to life.
Why would you change the tires? Because someone with expert knowledge has warned you, this thing might cost you. Move away from it. Do this and do that. Expert knowledge. In every project, there are people that have expert knowledge in specific areas. Listen to them. The next way to identify risk is what you call data gathering and data analysis. Let me give you a very simple data gathering and data analysis. Out of every 10 person that drinks and drives, 2 of them were involved in an accident. The probability is 20%. That's data gathering. What it means is that in every 10 person that drinks and drive, then 2 are susceptible to what? Accidents. My question will be, do I want to be susceptible to an accident? Now, if you are into production, if you are into production and you work for a company that produces baby Pampers, out of every 1,000 Pampers they produce, 5 of them is always faulty. 5. That's how many? That's about 0.5%. You will now need to ask yourself, is this risk worth it for me? If it's not worth it, you'll be like, no, I'm not ready for this. Data gathering. Another way is you analyze data. So I've done data gathering analysis for you, really. Depending on how complex, you analyze when it is complex to see it clearly from a normal gathering. You go ahead to analyze to find out what's the fact, what's the percentage or the degree to which this can affect me as a person. The next one is what you call interpersonal skills, interpersonal. Now, let me give you a very good example now. If I were to travel to your different countries right now, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a very simple thing. I'm going to speak to the person in those countries and say, what do you think are the best places I should go to? Where should I live? Where should I do this? Where should I do that? That interpersonal conversation is going to help me to avoid risk. If I just jump on the plane, land in those countries, just start doing my own things, whatever I see, I should take because I don't want to plan for risk. The next one is what you call a prompt list. Prompt list. A prompt list is simply what it calls itself, prompt list, a list of things that prompts you. Let me give you an example. A prompt list could be like a list of things that okay, like when you're drawing up your itinerary in the morning, you write plans. Or even when you set up your alarm clock, you might say in the next 6 hours, give me a beep so that I can wake up from sleep and go to this place. That list of prompts that you have, if you study those lists, it might tell you that if you're going out in the next 12 hours, then you might need to check your car because the headlight is not very good. So because you have a meeting by 12 midnight, you need to fix your headlight in case you get into a dark spot and you need to drive. Prompt. The last one is meetings. Meetings is just a place that people talk. If you've been around meetings, people talk. People talk more about negatives than positives in meetings. You and I know that really. Staying with them and listening to them, you will know a lot about risk. They will just be throwing it at you everywhere you go. Now, when you identify a risk, you should also be able to ask yourself the question, what is the likelihood that this risk will occur? Let me give you a very good example. So we're going to build a Burj Khalifa 2. One of them is going to be built in the city of Ethiopia. And the other one is going to be built in the city of, in Japan, somewhere in Japan. One is somewhere in Ethiopia. My question to you is, which of them would you be planning for, what do you call these things? Would you be afraid of tremors more for? Would you plan against tremors for?
I would plan more for tremors in Japan because it's an active volcano area.
Thank you. You see, that's what you call likelihood of occurrence. I would plan more for tremors more in Japan than I would plan for tremors in what? Ethiopia, because Japan is more active in terms of what do you call it? Volcanic eruptions than we have here. Okay, makes sense? So you've been able to, cool, thank you. Now you've been able to identify a list of risks. Come on, a long list, because sometimes, and don't forget, please never forget, when you mean risk, it's not only negative, it's also what? Negatives and positives. Okay, so you've identified a long list of risks. What are you going to do? You have to document those lists. You don't put it in your head and say, "No worry, I know it in my head." You know, I have very intelligent students and I don't, forget it, forget it. With this age that we are, the tech age, everybody knows everything. They're like, anyhow, just Google answer me. When, you know, in the last generation, they used to do a lot of note-taking, writing, jotting. Now, we don't do anything. We just tell it, forget it, I know it, I understand it. It's in my head. Worst case, Google, you know. So, but in risk management, you must document all the risk in what you call a risk register. A risk register. What is going to be a part of the risk register? What is going to be there is what? A list of the risk. Now, the next one is an interesting part. It's called the potential risk owner. It means who will be the risk owner of this risk? Who will have to take charge of this risk? So should in case this risk happens, who is responsible for it? Who must take charge of it? I think for this class now, the risk owner, let's make a risk owner. The risk owner is Somaya. So each risk will be given a risk owner, each risk. The next thing we're going to be considering is what you call the potential risk response. So what will be the response should this risk happen? It has to be clear. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about there, in that same line, I'm going to show you an example. What you call the root causes of the risk. What exactly causes this risk? What exactly would be the cause of this risk? Document it. Because that will lead you to understand what the triggers are. Because once I start seeing the triggers, I know that risk is about to crystallize. So I should prepare the response. The next thing you document is what? The potential impact of the threat or opportunity. Now, if this risk happens, it might cost us $100 million. That's a negative one now. But the other one could be the fact that if this risk crystallizes, we're going to make about $100 million in the positive now. Either it costs us or we make. The last one is the timing for the risk. There's some risk happens most times towards the end of the year. So you might say towards the end of the year. There are sometimes towards the maturity phase of a project. That's when those kind of risks happen. So different risks have different timings. Now you're going to develop these decent compendium of a list of risks and their what and the other things that inform them. It's called a risk register. Remember we said that risks have classifications. So you may want to classify risk based on what its effect. So a particular risk that will affect your schedule will be called a schedule-based risk. A particular risk that will affect your cost is called a cost-based risk. A particular risk that will affect your quality or that may affect your quality is called a quality-based risk. And the same thing for scope. So you are classifying risk based on effect. Make sense? The next one is you may want to also classify risk based on the source. Take, for instance, if the source of the problem, it's most likely going to come from an external source. You will call it what? An external based risk. Or if it's coming internally from the project, you call it what? An internal based risk. You could have technical, you could have non-technical, you could have industry based. It means these are risks that are what common among the food industry. These are the risks that are common among the bread industry, among the shoe industry. That's why if you're going to practice risk management in your career, you will realize that you might become industry specific. because you understand a particular industry so well that you become an expert in that industry to pick out risk. And then you have what you call a generic risk. Let me tell you what a generic risk is. The risk of falling sick is actually common to all men. The risk of becoming a billionaire is common to all men. The risk of whatever is common to all men. However, there are some risks that are just common to only you or a few people around you. It could be because of family, genetics. It could also be because of what? Habits. I hope that makes sense. The risks that are just peculiar to you or to your family, based on genetics or based on habits, are what? Generic to you. That's the word, generic. So those are, in every project too, there are risks that could be termed as what? Generic. I hope that makes sense to everyone. Get into the chat box and let me know if I'm too fast and there are things you're missing out, or if you're together with me. I will wait for 12 feedbacks on the chat box before I proceed. 12 feedbacks, let's go quickly.
I'm all good.
All good, thank you. Okay. While we continue, there are also ways you could classify risk. One of them is what we call the known risk. Now, if I ask you, what is the risk of failing in school? Every one of you know it. Why? Information that is fully studied and well understood, you already know. The risk of failing in school means you may not get a white-collar job, that's all. Might also mean that you might have might be mocked by your friends, but that doesn't really matter depending on how the kind of personality you have. So people just don't care about it, you know. But you already know what that is. So that's a known risk. There's an unknown, means you just don't know. Like, let me give you a very good example. The next pandemic in the world, you just don't know. It's unknown. You don't even know what it will come for. Would it be the same thing like the COVID-19, or would it not be? How will it attack human race? Are we going to do a vaccine or not? We don't have an idea. Until it comes, then we will face it. Then you also have the known unknown. There are some things that you know a bit of, but you don't really know it in so much details. Now, information that it's understood to exist, it's understood to exist, but it's not in the possession of the person seeking it. So you already know that there is a reason why Vladimir Putin is currently attacking Ukraine. There is a reason, but you might not know exactly why he's doing it. You might not really know exactly why he's doing it because you are not in his heart. Do you get? No matter what you think you know, you might still not know exactly why he's doing it. So we don't know. So you know a bit, but you don't know everything. And you might not know what is happening in between his inner cabinet. So you know a bit, but you don't know all. So we don't know. So that's why you call it unknown. Then there's the one you call the unknown known. Information that an individual organization has in its possession but whose existence, relevance, or value has not been realized. Let me explain that to you in one word. There are some things you know. Let me give you an example. How many of us can bake cake here in class? You can bake a cake.
I can.
You can, okay?
Yeah.
And you do it regularly?
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks you bake. Amazing. Do you commercialize it?
No.
Good. Okay. But do you think you could be, do you feel you can actually be a great chef baking?
I wouldn't say so because I take it as a hobby.
Okay, like a hobby. All right.
Yeah.
Abdurrahman says he bakes cakes too. So, interesting. So we've got loads of bakers here. Okay, 2 bakers here. Good. Now, you know, you may, okay, some folks in this class may actually have something that they're not telling us. What could that be? It could be the fact that they could bake very well in their head. They know the recipe, they know everything. They know if they want to do it, they will do it very well. But they've never had to do it. Because either they are too busy or life has not yet afforded them that time to do that thing. But you know that someday, one day I'll do it, one day I'll do it. There are things you feel one day I will do that you've not really done. But you know, you think you know your hand, you feel you have your hand on it. So you call it what? Unknown known. I'll beg you to spend time, listen again, and also to do what? Try to make sense about the classifications of risk. Taking a career in risk management, this will be a big blessing to you. Also, if you want to write the exams, it's good that you understand these concepts. All right, we're leaving these right now. Also, when you are talking about the issue of risk, you need 3 things you must become acquainted with. You must be assured, rest assured you understand it very well. The first of them is what you call a risk threshold. A risk threshold is the amount of risk and the potential impact of that risk occurring that you are willing to accept. So any risk, I'm using now any risk now, you see the word? Any risk, amount of risk, any risk that will not exceed $500,000, I am in for it. So the amount of the risk and its potential impact on my finances should not exceed $500,000. That's a lot of money, you know, but I'm ready for that risk. Good. Now, that's what you call a risk threshold. What it means is that if you're managing a project, you should know what is the risk threshold you have been given. Because if you're going to have to take a risk, you must take it within a threshold. If you go above that threshold, you might be costing your organization more harm than good. The next thing is called what? Which is the next one informs the first. The next one is called the risk appetite. It's called the degree of uncertainty an organization or individual is willing to accept in anticipation of a reward. The degree of uncertainty, you are willing to accept. Those are things that I'm sure you understand them for what they are. The degree of uncertainty an organization is willing to accept in anticipation for a reward. Both you yourself as a PM and also the organization that you represent will have risk appetites. You should be very clear on what yours is. The last thing you also must take into cognizance is the level of risk exposure, above which you will not accept, below of which you will accept. A risk tolerance, it's more or less like what the threshold thing. But this time around, anything above the threshold, I'm not coming. But everything below the threshold, I'm in for it. So everything below $500,000, I'm in for it. And everything above $500,000, I'm out of it. That's tolerance. Okay. You've completed your identification of risk. You want to go for something else. And this time around, it's called what? Analyzing your risk. What do? There are two kinds of analysis of risk, two. The very first one of them is called the qualitative risk analysis. Qualitative risk analysis. If you've ever done anything that you've had to do, the issue of the word qual and quant, one of them is descriptive, the other one is quantitative, as in figures, numbers. Now, let's stay with the qual for now. Let's read it. It says, the process of prioritizing risk for further analysis or actions by assessing the probability of occurrence and impact, as well as likelihood to occur. I think I didn't put that there, but I'll put it down for you if I send them to you. All right, let me explain what that means to you guys. You have a long list of what do you call it? Risk. The next thing you're going to have to look at is the word to check out and see what is the priority, which of them do I think? And when you say which of them, when you start prioritizing, you're just using your subjective mind. When I use the word subjective, it just means the way I think, the way I feel. This is my feeling. It's not like this, I'm an expert. It just means this is my feeling. Like when you say, I just like this person, it doesn't mean that person is the best person in the world. It just means in your heart, you just feel more for this person than for the other person. It's got nothing to do with if you compare both of them, who is the best. No. It's just the way you feel about it. So qualitatively, it's when you get into the job of doing what? Describe in your own subjective way, prioritizing risk. So you say this one, I feel this one is the worst. So I'll put that one number one so I can attend to that one more. I feel this one is the best. I will put that one the more so I can make the most of it. That kind of thing, that prioritization of risk. Now, you also prioritize based on what in your mind, what you call likelihood of occurrence or probability of occurrence. So this particular risk will occur. The way I feel, the way I see it, my point of view, it will occur 4 times a day. So I will prioritize that one to be given so much of attention. Now, what does this analysis do? It focuses the energy on what? High priority risk. It is subjective. It's based on your own perception of risk or the team's perception of risk. And it provides a list of prioritized risk for further actions. So it provides, at the end of this analysis, it provides you and me or the project with a list of prioritized risks for further actions. However, when you want to go deeper into the analysis of risk, then you must go into what you call the quantitative risk analysis. What is the quantitative risk analysis? It's a process of numerically, it means you now have to give it a number, analyzing the combined effect of identified individual project risk and other sources of uncertainty on the overall project objective. Now, let me show you something. This is a very detailed work and can take you a lot of time. You don't do quantitative analysis on any project. That project must be a large and a complex project. It must be of immense strategic importance, and must be something that is required by the stakeholders before you can, because it's expensive. It's an expensive endeavor. Now, let me show you why this could be expensive. Think about the fact that process A has 4 risks in it. And then you are saying this project A, we might not even do it, but in case we do it, it will cause process B to happen. And process B has 12 risks. So you will start costing all of those risks, analyzing all of them. I'll show you a very simple one, and let me cut it off from there. I'll show you a very simple one and allow you to give it a try. But before I move on from there, allow me to stop here and show you a very simple one. Now take out your pens, take your papers, and then let's write this down. Ready? Once you're ready, say ready. Pens, papers, and say ready.
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 Thank you. How many people are ready? Cool. All right. I guess the whole house is ready. Cool. So we have a risk. Risk A. Risk A happens 5 times a day. The cost of each time it happens is $5. Risk A, 5 times a day. The cost of each time it happens, it's $5. Risk B happens twice a week. The cost of each time it happens is $30. Are you there?
Yeah. Yes, yes.
And then risk C happens fortnightly. Every fortnight means every 2 weeks. Every time risk C happens, it costs $400. Can anybody repeat what I just said to me?
Risk A happens 5 times a day at a cost of $5. Risk B 2 times a week at $30, and risk C 2 times a month or every fortnight at $400.
So it happened that, okay, $400. All right, guys, everybody get to work. I want to know which of the risks is the worst.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Can someone type in the chat box because my line is breaking? I hardly hear the message so that I can work with others.
Okay, are you asking some? We should type the question on the chat box for you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, please, anyone who wrote it down, please just help us put it on the chat box for her. Most people have voted for C. Let's see how it goes. We have 2 more minutes to wrap this up. The answer is C. Now, I cooked up that question from my head. It could get a lot more complex than that. But Basically, what I wanted you to give a try to was to see the fact that it was not even by the number of occurrence. You know, it's got nothing to do with the number of occurrence. Some risk can happen, and then the impact on that risk could be more. So your ability to analyze and see the impact of a risk. Yeah. All right, thanks, Flossie. So that's when you go into what you call the quantitative risk analysis, giving it numbers. All right, let's keep going. The next school of thought that we need to spend some time out learning and trying to engage with is what we call the probability and impact matrix. Probability and impact matrix. Now, here is you trying to look at the probability of occurrence and the impact should they happen. The probability of occurrence and the impact should they happen. So in this matrix, what they did was they looked at the scale, they call this scale. So they analyzed every risk and they said, this one is very high. That's if the probability is greater than 70 for that particular project, for that particular risk. And if the time that risk will last is more than 6 months. In terms of cost, it will be considered a very high risk if it is greater than what? $5 million. And in terms of quality, it will be considered very high if it has a significant impact on the overall functionality. So they've broken down their what? Metrics of measurement in respect to what? Probability, time, cost, and quality. Engage with this chart, see how much of it you understand. And then if you have any questions, meet me in the chat room and then we'll do it together. It's pretty basic and simple, nothing mega about it. Yeah, something interesting to engage with right now is called the risk response. You know, we all agreed that there are two kinds of risk. It's either it's a negative risk or it's a positive risk. And if it's a negative risk, it's called what? Who remembers? Negative risk.
Threat.
Huh?
It's called threat.
Threat. Thank you. And if it's a positive risk, it's called what?
Opportunity.
Opportunity. Amazing. Thank you very much. Now, here we are. The question is, how do you respond to whether it's a negative or to a positive risk? Today, I'm going to introduce you to two of my best friends. One of them is my ATM card, and the second one is a lady called Ese, E-S-E. And interestingly, she's Nigerian. I don't know any other tribe that bears the name Ese. In case you know, just let me know. I'll be glad to make friends with her. So I'm going to introduce you to my two friends. One is called my ATM card, and the second one is a lady called what? Ese. So you're going to take these two people along with you on your journey of becoming a project manager. So bring out your ATM card wherever it is and keep it beside you and say, you're going to be my next big friend. And then look for that girl wherever you see her. Go on Facebook, go on LinkedIn, look for a lady called Ese and make her your friend. You won't regret it. Why do I use my ATM card very often? It's because negative risk needs to either be avoided, transferred, or mitigated. 3 things you do for a negative risk. 3, you avoid them, you transfer them, or you mitigate them. Very easy one. I'm aware that drinking and driving causes accidents. What do? I stop drinking and driving. What have I done? I have avoided the risk. Now, I know that I could be a bit careless when I'm driving because sometimes there's a whole lot in my head. So what do? I take up an insurance policy such that if I have a bash on my car or I have an accident, the insurance takes over and make the payments. What am I doing? I'm transferring my negative problems to the insurance house. Now, I know that I'm coming on the street and there is this very wild dog. The dog attacks me heads on. It's coming for me. If I run, worst case, the dog won't let me go. I cannot transfer it. What do? I face it head on with a good kick to its jaw. What am I doing? I'm mitigating the risk. Did you see it, guys? You avoid it, you transfer, but when you cannot avoid and transfer, you face it head on, you mitigate it. It's not every risk you can avoid. It's not every risk you can transfer, but some risk you must mitigate. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Cool. The ATM card, it's your way out of negative risk. Now, the next thing you're going to do is the lady I told you about, essay, exploit, share, and enhance. Exploit, share, and enhance. What will this lady do for you? Now, I'm looking for a very positive risk now. I don't want to tell you something that is very akin to my own area. I want to say something that is very, very neutral to you. Okay, let me give you an example. Remember us telling the story about we went to a place and then we saw a shirt we've been eyeing to buy for $350. It's been pegged at $350. But luckily, on our last trip to Cuba, we saw the exact same shirt being sold for $200. We're wondering where this guy in the world bought that shirt from. What I would have done, I would have stood in that place, bought out all of those shirts from that guy's shop, or call up my friends and tell them, I bought you this shirt for $250 or $280. On my way back from Cuba, I'm going to distribute the shirts to you. All of you will give me $280 for this shirt. They will be glad because they would have saved what? $70. What am I doing? I am exploiting a situation for my own advantage. Exploiting. Now imagine that all I had in my account was $10,000, or home and away. And here was I in the shop in Cuba. To buy up everything in that shop is $27,000. What am I going to do? Yes, I want to exploit it, but I cannot exploit it because I don't have the means. What do? I will call friends. I will call my friends, Timothy, and say, Timothy, can you send the balance? And he says, okay, I don't have up to that. What can you do? He said, I can do 7. I will call Mosope and say, Mosope, can you send the balance? And he will say, no, I only have 8. Then I will call Mana. Mana, are you in class? And he says, yes. I said, please send the balance. What am I doing? I am sharing the risk. And when I come back and I finish selling the shirts to everyone, I'm making a profit. I will give each and every one of them not only what they gave me for the business, but also a tip to help them. The tip I'm giving them as gratitude for what they did, because what they shared in my risk. Okay. And then the last one is the one called enhance. If you've ever done a bushfire before, a bushfire, maybe you went for a camp, if you've gone for a camp, or you have the chimney that burns coal to warm the house in your place, whatever you've done along that lines. Whenever the light is going out, what do? You could take a piece of paper or piece of paper in your room, throw it into the chimney to keep the place warm. That you want to enhance the ability of the fire to stay. Now, what are you doing? You are enhancing a positive. I've used very simple examples to teach you how to either use your ATM or speak with a lady called Esther. Now, the thing you're going to tell me is that, yeah, E.T., but two things, escalate and accept, repeat itself across two ends. Absolutely, yes. Why does escalate and accept repeat itself across two ends? I must tell you, first and foremost, this is it. Whatever you don't accept, you cannot solve. Okay, let me give you a very good example. Someone comes to you and tells you, your next big thing now that will help you to transit in your journey in life is to get certified as a product manager. And you're like, yeah, we're like, what's that? Ah, that's not the next big thing. What have you done? You've refused to accept that's the next big thing. You will never engage in the learnings for becoming a project manager, or even thinking about writing an exam, or even thinking about transiting into becoming a PM. But if you say, yeah, that's true, absolutely true, immediately you accept, then you will respond appropriately. That's why accepting first is the first way to handle what? Risk. Let me make it very simple again to you. So back to our case. We've got 5 more minutes, guys. Let's we'll wrap it up with this slide. Now, back to our case. When we talked about, if you remember when we touched on building Burj Khalifa in Ethiopia and building another one in Japan. Now, when we started up building Burj Khalifa in Ethiopia, all of us, we have this default mindset that there are no tremors around that region. Globally, there are no tremors around that region. So what do? We are not even bothered to plan for tremors. We're not bothered. Then someone comes to us and tells us, sirs and madams, we anticipate that before the next 3 years, tremors will start in these regions. And we're like, excuse me. In the last 300 years, there has not been a single tremor. Over the last 6,000 years, there's never been a single tremor around this region. There is no way there can be a tremor in this region. You see, because of that, we're not going to plan for it. And when that risk happens, it will hit us big time. Your ability to respond adequately to a risk, you must first accept the risk will happen, could happen. Else you will not respond properly. The last one is the one escalate. Escalate. You see, have you ever been involved in trying to manage a situation alone? Maybe in the workplace, maybe in school, maybe someone was bullying you, but you never told your parents, you never told the teacher, you never told anyone, you just kept trying to deal with it yourself. If you've ever been there or you've ever watched movies like that, you know it never ends well. Never ends well. So the project manager principle teaches you to escalate all things. Let your line managers know you are dealing with a risk. So that, because what you don't see, they might see. What you don't understand, they might understand. What you cannot anticipate for, they might be well suited to anticipate for it. So it's in your best interest when you communicate your struggles so that people can do what? Advise you better. So escalate. If you remember, as we wrap up, when we touched on the fact that you must develop a risk register. And one thing we were big on was the fact that you must assign a person to every risk. Now, in risk responding, you must assign someone to it. Someone must be responsible for every risk, every, and mark the word, every. Now, the next thing is what you must develop options, select the right strategy, and agree upon it on the way you will respond to a risk. So yes, they are going, you want to avoid, you want to transfer, you want to mitigate, you want to exploit, share, or enhance. You must develop it clearly. Let it be agreed by the entire house how you want to respond to that risk. The next thing you need to remember is you might want to address risk by a priority based on the greatest to the less. Now, that's the priority that I choose in writing this text. But there's something you need to also remember. This might not be the greatest to the least. Sometimes you might not follow by their rankings. You might follow by what? Their sources. Let me use, for instance, a small risk may cause a bigger risk. Why don't you address the small risk so that you can avert the bigger risk from happening? So I will prioritize them based on what the triggers. I hope that makes sense to you. If it doesn't make sense, you just go to the chat box and say it doesn't make sense right now. So a particular risk could cause another risk. If you're looking at prioritizing risk only by greatest to smallest, then you might be looking at putting the horse, the cart before the horse. But if you put the horse before the cart, by managing the small problem so that we avert the bigger problem, then you've done a great job. Okay, the last few things are you add resources and activities to the budget schedule and to support risk response. So when you are planning your budgeting and your scheduling, remember, you must also make room for what? Things that will support risk response. Don't forget, if you forget what we discussed the last time, go back to the last two notes and see when we touched on contingency planning, contingency reserves, contingency planning, contingency reserves, which is when you put a markup to the budget, to the schedule that can make room for what? Risk, really. Choose from various risk response strategies to determine a risk for each risk. So each risk will have its own unique response strategy. I've lost time now. Develop a fallback plan in case the primary strategy is not effective. I'll stop there for today. What it means is there are times when the primary risk will cause another risk. So you must develop a fallback plan. How will, if it happens, if one risk changes dimensions to another, what will be my own plan. Imagine when the Delta variant moves to become the Omicron, World Health was looking for ways to cope them all together. So thank you very much once again for being around today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we continue. If you have any questions, please let's engage with it.